The mysterious and chilling disappearance of Choi Sung-hee and Jeon Minyung. Unsolved, cryptic, and disturbing events that still baffle investigators. What would you do if someone you knew simply vanished without a trace? The unsettling disappearance of two ordinary South Korean students that still haunts their families and friends. Imagine this. It's an ordinary evening. You're talking to your friend, making plans for the future, laughing together. You say goodbye, thinking it's just another day in a life that seems so predictable. But what if, just like that, they disappeared? No call, no text, no trace. What would you do? How would you react? Would you ever believe that one moment they were there, and the next moment they were gone, vanished, without a single clue left behind? This is the chilling reality that took place in October 2014, when Choi Sung-hee and Jeon Minyung, two bright, ambitious college students from Seoul, South Korea, suddenly vanished without a trace. Their disappearance, which has puzzled investigators and captivated public interest, still remains unsolved to this day. Their families and friends were left in a state of shock and fear, not knowing what happened or where they were. So, what exactly happened to them? Did they choose to vanish? Or was something far darker at play? Join me as we uncover the bizarre, unsettling details of their disappearance and the theories that still surround this eerie case. A normal night that quickly spiraled into a disappearance. The last moments of Choi Sung-hee and Jeon Minyung before they vanished without a trace. The evening of October 14th, 2014 began like any other for two college students, Choi Sung-hee and Jeon Minyung. The pair met up at a cozy cafe in the heart of Seoul, just as many young people do. It wasn't anything extraordinary. They were simply catching up on life, talking about their studies, their dreams, and making future plans, an ordinary night between two friends. But as the night unfolded, something began to feel off. It was getting late, and after enjoying their coffee and conversation, they decided to leave the cafe together. It was around 9:30 p.m. when they walked out the door. But little did they know, this would be the last time anyone would see them. As they left the cafe, they didn't appear to be in any distress or hurry. They seemed like any other pair of young adults heading home after a casual evening out. But as the hours passed and neither of them returned home, the families started to grow anxious. Neither Choi nor Jeon had been in contact with anyone since that moment. They hadn't returned any of their calls or messages, and there was no explanation for their sudden disappearance. This was out of character for both of them. They were responsible, reliable young adults who always kept their families in the loop about their whereabouts. And so, their families grew increasingly alarmed. Was it possible that something had happened to them? Or had they simply lost contact for some unknown reason? A nationwide search for answers. The panic that gripped South Korea as authorities launched an intense investigation to locate the missing students. Once the families realized their loved ones hadn't returned home, they wasted no time in contacting the authorities. The police were immediately alerted to the case, and a missing person report was filed. It didn't take long before the media picked up the story, and soon, the whole country was in a state of shock. Choi Sung-hee and Jeon Minyung had vanished into thin air, and no one had any idea why or how. The police quickly launched an extensive investigation. They started by combing through all available CCTV footage from the area around the cafe. Every camera in the vicinity was reviewed, in hopes of finding any clue that could lead them to the missing students. But after hours of viewing tapes, nothing significant turned up. No one had seen them after they left the cafe. It was as though they had disappeared into the night without a trace. At the same time, law enforcement reached out to local hospitals, hoping that perhaps Choi and Jeon had been involved in an accident and were admitted without identification. But again, no such luck. There was no record of their being treated anywhere. The more the investigation unfolded, the stranger the case became. It was as though the two students had simply vanished into thin air, The public and the police were left with one burning question. What could have happened? Could they have been abducted? Or was it something more complicated than that? Theories emerge. Did they choose to disappear? Or were they victims of a crime? The search for answers led to multiple possibilities and a growing sense of confusion. As the investigation deepened, theories began to surface. On one hand, there were those who believed that Choi and Jeon may have voluntarily disappeared. Perhaps they had decided to leave their old lives behind, to escape personal problems or pressures. It wasn't unheard of for young adults to sometimes vanish without warning. Perhaps they had planned it all along, choosing to start fresh in a new city or even a new country. This theory of voluntary disappearance made sense in some ways. After all, there were no signs of a struggle. No one had witnessed anything out of the ordinary. The students weren't known to have been involved in any criminal activities or dangerous situations. They had no known enemies. The letter that would later be discovered added weight to this theory, leading many to wonder if they had simply chosen to leave. But there was another possibility that couldn't be ignored. The darker side of things. Could they have been victims of a crime? Some speculated that they had been kidnapped, possibly by someone they knew. Or perhaps they had been lured into a trap by an unknown assailant. The lack of any ransom demand only made the situation more perplexing. Could this be the work of a serial abductor? Or was there some deeper, more personal motive behind their disappearance? In the face of so many conflicting theories, it was hard for anyone to know what to believe. The question remained, did they disappear on their own accord, or was something more sinister at play? The mysterious letter, a chilling piece of evidence that offered more questions than answers, leaving investigators and the public stunned months after the disappearance. A cryptic letter was discovered among Choi Sung-hee's personal belongings. The letter, which had been carefully hidden, was unsettling. It was written in a tone that suggested both finality and a sense of purpose, leading many to believe it was a message left behind by Choi herself. The letter contained vague, cryptic phrases like, "It's time to leave the world behind," and references to a life beyond the shadows. It appeared as if Choi had been contemplating her departure for some time. Could this letter provide the key to understanding what happened to her and Jeon? The content of the letter was troubling because it didn't explain what had truly happened. It didn't describe an escape plan or offer any solid clues about where they had gone. Instead, it was full of metaphorical language and obscure references. Some investigators wondered if the letter was a way for Choi to send one final message to her family, one that would make sense only to them. But even after careful analysis, no clear explanation emerged. In the context of the investigation, the letter only deepened the mystery. Was it truly written by Choi? Or had someone else planted it to mislead the authorities? If Choi and Jeon had voluntarily disappeared, the letter seemed to suggest it. But why didn't they ever contact their families or friends afterward? Did they choose to disappear forever? Unanswered questions and strange circumstances surrounding the possible self-escape of two young students who may have been seeking a new life beyond the ordinary. The more time passed, the more the idea of voluntary disappearance began to seem plausible. Could Choi and Jeon have simply grown tired of their lives? Perhaps they had reached a breaking point, stressed by academic pressures, family expectations, or the weight of societal norms. In an increasingly fast-paced world, could they have seen their only option as an escape into the unknown? Some people began to wonder, what if they had planned their disappearance for a long time? Could they have made arrangements, planned their exit meticulously, and then executed it flawlessly? Their absence would explain why they didn't reach out to their loved ones, because in their minds, they were leaving it all behind. But even with this theory gaining some traction, there were still glaring questions. How could two young people, who had families and friends who loved them, decide to disappear without a word? Why did they leave behind so little evidence? And what about the cryptic letter? Was it truly an explanation of their escape? Or was it part of a much larger mystery? The case remains unresolved, the mysterious disappearance of Choi Sung-hee and Jeon Min-goon still haunts their families, friends, and investigators as new clues continue to evade discovery. Despite years of searching and countless theories, the disappearance of Choi Sung-hee and Jeon Min-goon remains one of South Korea's most puzzling and unsolved mysteries. What happened to them? Were they victims of a crime? Or did they voluntarily disappear? Could the letter provide the answers? Or does it raise even more questions? As the case lingers in the public's mind, the unanswered questions continue to torment their families, friends, and even the authorities. Every year that passes, the chance of finding new evidence grows slimmer. But the truth remains elusive.